The Sunday morning 2 weeks after my 14th birthday, my mother stood at the kitchen sink in our small house in Erie, Pennsylvania, washing the same coffee mug for the third time, and without turning around to look at me, she told me that my father and she had decided I had become too expensive to keep around, that they needed the money they had been spending on me for my younger brother's hockey training, and that I had until the end of the day to pack a single duffel bag and call my Aunt Cordelia in Cleveland to come pick me up. She did not say I love you. She did not say I am sorry. She washed that coffee mug 3 times while I stood in the kitchen doorway in my pajamas trying to understand whether I had heard her correctly. I had heard her correctly. Before I tell you what happened 12 years later when my father stood in the audience at my naval commissioning ceremony in Annapolis, and his voice cracked so badly during the moment of recognition that the cadet next to him put a hand on his shoulder, I want to ask you something. Where in the world are you watching this from tonight? And have you ever been told, in the actual words your parent used, that you were a financial inconvenience? Drop it in the comments. I am telling this story because I think the children who hear that sentence carry it differently than the children who hear other things, and I want to know who else has carried it. My name is Imani. I am 26 years old, and I am currently a lieutenant in the United States Navy, serving as a surface warfare officer aboard a guided missile destroyer based out of Norfolk, Virginia. I was commissioned as an officer 2 years ago after graduating from the United States Naval Academy in Annapolis, where I was the recipient of multiple academic and leadership awards, and where I graduated in the top 15% of my class. I am, by every measure my career uses, considered a promising young officer with a future ahead of her. None of this, when I was 14 years old standing in my mother's kitchen in pajamas, would have seemed remotely possible. I want to tell you how I got from one to the other. I grew up in a small house on the east side of Erie, Pennsylvania, in a family of 4. My father, Marcus, worked as a long-haul truck driver for a regional freight company, and my mother, Yolanda, worked the day shift at a hospital cafeteria. We were not poor exactly, but we were always one missed paycheck away from being poor, and my parents had spent their entire marriage in the kind of low-grade financial anxiety that shapes the personalities of everyone in a household. My younger brother Devonte was 4 years younger than me, which made him 10 when the events of this story began. Devonte had been identified at the age of 7 as a hockey prodigy by a youth coach in Erie who had told my parents, in the breathless, certain voice of a man who had never been wrong about anything in his life, that my brother could play in the NHL someday if my parents were willing to invest in his training. That sentence rearranged my entire family. My parents had not been hockey people. We were a black family in a part of Pennsylvania where most of the hockey families were white and well off, and my father had always assumed that hockey was a sport for other people's children. But the coach had been so certain, and my brother had been so good, and my mother had been so flattered by the attention that a white youth coach was paying to her son, that within 6 months of that first conversation, my parents had committed themselves financially to a level of investment in Devonte's hockey career that they could not actually afford. The numbers on hockey training are absurd. I learned this much later, when I was in my 20s and finally able to look at it analytically. The skates alone for a child playing competitive hockey can run several $100s, and they have to be replaced as the child grows. The equipment, the ice time, the travel teams, the tournaments, the personal coaching, the summer hockey camps, the league fees, the gas to drive to practice 4 times a week, all of it adds up to tens of thousands of dollars per year for a single child. My parents did not have tens of thousands of dollars per year. They had what they had, which was barely enough for a family of 4 to live a modest life in Erie. So they made a decision. They started cutting from one place to fund another. The place they cut from was me. I did not understand it at first. I was 9 when the cuts began. I noticed that my new school clothes had stopped showing up in September. I noticed that my mother had started saying we could not afford things we had previously been able to afford. I noticed that the small allowance my father used to give me on Saturdays for helping him wash the car had quietly disappeared. When I asked my mother about any of these things, she told me that I was being selfish, that my brother needed tea. He money for his training, and that I should be a good big sister and not complain. So I did not complain. I learned not to ask. I learned to wear my old clothes for an extra year. I learned to walk to school in shoes that did not fit properly. I learned to skip the school field trip in 5th grade because the permission slip required $18 and there were no $18 in our house anymore for me. Devonte, meanwhile, was getting better at hockey. His coach had moved him onto the most competitive travel team in the region. My parents were now driving him to Pittsburgh and Buffalo and Cleveland for tournaments almost every weekend. My mother had started working a second job on weekends at a diner so they could afford the gas and the hotel rooms. My father was driving longer routes to bring in more money. The whole family, every breath we took, was now organized around my brother's hockey, and the only person whose life was not being consulted in the rearrangement was me. I grew up in the silence of being the child who did not need anything because my parents had already decided I would not be permitted to need anything. The summer I was 13, my mother sat me down at the kitchen table after my brother had gone to bed and told me in a tight voice that the next year was going to be tight and that I needed to pull my weight. I asked her what that meant. She told me I needed to start paying for my own school supplies, my own clothes, my own toiletries, my own everything. I was 13 years old. I did not have a job. I asked her how I was supposed to pay for these things. She told me to figure it out. She told me that other 13-year-olds babysat. She told me she had figured things out at my age and that I could too. I started babysitting that summer. I babysat for 3 different families on our block for $2 and $3 an hour, walking from house to house in the hot, eerie summer with my own house key in my pocket because nobody was ever home when I needed to come back for anything. I made about $40 a week. I bought my own school supplies that August. I bought 1 new pair of jeans at the Walmart on Peach Street. I bought a few notebooks and a pack of pens. I felt, for the first time in my life, the strange combination of pride and grief that comes from being a child who has had to start providing for herself. I made it through 8th grade. I made decent grades, despite everything. I had a few friends at school, mostly other quiet kids who did not have a lot of money either. I did not bring friends home, because home was a place that did not have anything for me to offer them. I read library books in my bedroom in the evenings while my parents drove my brother to hockey practice. I had become, by the age of 14, a child who did not really live in her own house anymore. Then came the Sunday morning 2 weeks after my 14th birthday. I had not had a birthday party. I had not been given a gift. My mother had baked a small cake from a box mix, and we had eaten it after dinner, and that had been it. I had told myself it was fine. I had told myself I was getting too old for birthday fuss anyway. I had stopped expecting anything from my parents by then. I came downstairs that Sunday morning in my pajamas. My mother was at the kitchen sink, washing dishes. The house was very quiet. My father was already at work, which was unusual for a Sunday. My brother was at a hockey clinic that had started at 6 in the morning. "Good morning, Mom." My mother did not turn around. "Imani, sit down at the table. I need to talk to you." I sat down. I knew immediately that something was wrong. My mother had a particular voice she used when she was about to say something difficult, a voice that was quieter and tighter than her normal voice, and she was using that voice now. "Your father and I have been talking. We have been looking at the family budget for next year, and we have decided that we cannot continue to keep you in the house anymore. You have become too expensive for us to keep around. Your brother needs the money we have been spending on you for his training. He has a chance at a real career in hockey, and we have to give him every opportunity we can. We have decided that you are going to go live with your Aunt Cordelia in Cleveland. I need you to pack a duffel bag this morning. I have already called your aunt. She is driving over to pick you up this afternoon. She will be here by 3. She did not turn around to look at me while she said any of this. She was washing the same coffee mug, over and over, in slow, circular motions. I sat at the kitchen table for a long moment. I want to be honest about what I felt in that moment, because the truth is that I felt nothing at first. I felt the kind of empty hollow nothing that you feel when somebody has just told you something so big that your brain has not yet figured out how to translate it into a feeling. I watched M. Why Mother's back? I watched the slow circle of the dish towel on the coffee mug. I watched the morning sunlight come through the kitchen window and land on the linoleum floor. Mom, did you just say I have to move out? Yes, Imani. Mom, I am 14 years old. You will be fine. Your aunt is a good woman. She has space in her apartment. She has agreed to take you. We are going to send her a small amount of money each month to help with your expenses, but you will need to get a job when you are old enough, and you will need to figure out the rest. You are mature, Imani. You have always been mature. You can handle this. Mom, please look at me when you are saying this. Please. She did not turn around. She took another mug out of the sink and started washing it. Imani, I do not have time for this. I have a lot to do today. Please go upstairs and pack your bag. I have left an empty duffel on your bed. I went upstairs. I do not remember walking up the stairs. I remember being in my bedroom, standing in front of my small bed with the empty duffel bag on top of the covers. And I remember looking around at my room, at the few books on my shelf, at the small photograph of my grandmother Estelle on my nightstand, at the second-hand corkboard on the wall where I had pinned a few drawings I had made in art class. And I remember the moment my brain finally caught up to what my mother had said, and I sat down on the edge of my bed, and I cried, silently, into my hands for almost an hour. When I had finished crying, I did something that I am still proud of 12 years later. I stopped crying, I wiped my face on the corner of my pillowcase, and I started to pack. I packed everything I owned into the duffel bag. It all fit. 2 pairs of jeans, 4 t-shirts, 1 sweatshirt, 3 pairs of underwear, 2 pairs of socks, my toothbrush, the library book I was halfway through, which I would have to return to the Cleveland Library later, the photograph of my grandmother Estelle, the small wooden box where I kept the $43 I had saved from babysitting. That was all I owned. I closed the duffel. I sat on the bed. I waited. Aunt Cordelia arrived at 3 p.m. on the dot. Aunt Cordelia was my father's younger sister. She lived in a small apartment in Cleveland, where she worked as a paralegal at a downtown law firm. She was 36 years old at the time, never married, no children. She had always been kind to me at the few family gatherings where I had seen her. I had not seen her in nearly 2 years before she pulled into our driveway that Sunday afternoon. I came downstairs with my duffel bag. Aunt Cordelia was standing in our living room talking to my mother in a low, tense voice. My mother had her arms crossed. Aunt Cordelia's face was the kind of carefully composed angry that women in our family wear when they are trying not to make a scene in front of children. They both stopped talking when I came down the stairs. Imani, hi, sweetheart, are you ready? Yes, Aunt Cordelia. Do you have everything you need? This is everything I have. Aunt Cordelia looked at the small duffel bag. Then she looked at my mother. The look that passed between them was something I will never forget. Aunt Cordelia did not say anything in front of me. She walked over to me and took the duffel bag out of my hand and put her arm around my shoulder, and she walked me out of the house I had lived in my entire life. I did not say goodbye to my mother. My mother did not say goodbye to me. I got into the front seat of my aunt's old Toyota Corolla. I buckled my seat belt. My aunt got in the driver's seat. She backed out of the driveway. I watched the house I had grown up in get smaller in the side mirror, and then we turned the corner and it was gone, and I was a 14-year-old girl in the front seat of her aunt's car heading to a city I had only visited twice in my life. We had driven for about 20 minutes when Aunt Cordelia finally spoke. Imani, I need you to know something. What your mother and father did today is wrong. It is not normal. It is not okay. I want you to remember that because you are going to spend a lot of years in your life trying to convince yourself that it was somehow your fault. It was not your fault. You did not become too expensive. You are a child. Children are not expenses. Do you understand me? Yes, Aunt Cordelia. I am going to do my best to take care of you. I am not your mother. I am not going to pretend to be your mother. But I have a spare bedroom, and I make enough money to feed you and clothe you, and I will not, for one day of your life, make you feel like you are too expensive to be in the room. Do you hear me? I started crying again. I tried not to, but I could not help it. I cried in the front seat of my aunt's Corolla for most of the rest of the drive to Cleveland, and Aunt Cordelia did not try to make me stop. She just drove, with one hand on the steering wheel and her other hand on top of mine, on the center console. I lived with Aunt Cordelia for the next 4 years. I want to tell you what those 4 years were like, because they are the part of the story that explains everything that came after. Aunt Cordelia gave me my own bedroom in her 2-bedroom apartment on the west side of Cleveland. The bedroom had a single bed, a small desk, and a window that looked out on a parking lot. She bought me a new comforter the first weekend I was there. She took me to a Target and let me pick out a few things to make the room feel like mine. She enrolled me in the local public high school. She bought me school supplies. She made me dinner every night. She did not have a lot of money, but she had enough, and she shared every dollar of it with me without ever once making me feel like I was costing her something. She also did one other thing that changed my life. She told me, in the first week I lived with her, that she expected me to take school very seriously. She told me that the only way out of the situation I had been put in was through my own brain, and that my brain was the only thing my parents had not been able to take from me, and that I needed to invest in it the way other people invested in their bodies or their houses. I took her seriously. I had nothing else to do. I did not have a social life in Cleveland yet. I did not have hobbies. I had a small bedroom and a public library card and a high school full of teachers I did not know. I poured my entire 14-year-old self into school the way some children pour themselves into video games or sports. I was good at school. I had always been good at school, but I had never had the conditions to be great at it. Now I had the conditions. I had quiet. I had food. I had an aunt who asked me about my homework at dinner and who actually listened to my answers. By the end of my freshman year, I was at the top of my class. By the end of my sophomore year, I had been recommended for an early college program at Cleveland State University. By the end of my junior year, I was being looked at by college recruiters. The summer after my junior year, I attended a free summer enrichment program at a local community college, where I took a class on government and political science taught by a retired naval officer named Commander Reginald Fairweather. Commander Fairweather had served 28 years in the United States Navy before retiring to teach. He noticed me on the first day of class. By the third week, he had pulled me aside after class to ask me what I was planning to do with my life. "I do not know yet, Commander." "Have you ever thought about the military?" "I have not. I do not really know anyone in the military." "You should think about it, Imani. Specifically, you should think about the service academies. West Point, the Air Force Academy, the Naval Academy. They are full scholarships to 4-year universities for the top young people in the country, and they produce officers who go on to do extraordinary things. You would be an excellent candidate. I am going to give you some materials to read this week. I want you to look them over and tell me what you think." I read the materials. I read everything I could find about the United States Naval Academy. The idea of a fully paid college education, room and board included, in exchange for 5 years of service as a naval officer, lit up something in my head that had been dark for a very long time. I was 16 years old. I had been told by my own parents that I was a financial burden. The Naval Academy was offering me a chance to attend one of the best schools in America for free, and to come out the other side as an officer in the United States Navy. I told Aunt Cordelia about it that night at dinner. She put her fork down and looked at me for a long time. "Imani, if you want this, I am going to help you get it. I do not know anything about the military, but I know how to fill out applications. I know how to find recommendation letters. I know how to drive you to interviews. We will figure it out together." We figured it out together. The application process for a service academy is brutal. You need to be nominated by a member of the United States Congress. You need to pass a physical fitness test. You need to pass a medical exam. You need essays, recommendations, transcripts, leadership history. I did all of it during my senior year of high school. Commander Fairweather wrote me a personal recommendation letter that I later learned was one of the strongest he had written in his entire career. Aunt Cordelia drove me to my congressional interview in Cleveland. I was nominated by my congressional district. 6 months later, in March of my senior year, I received my acceptance letter to the United States Naval Academy. I did not call my parents. I had not spoken to my parents in 4 years. They did not know where I was living. They did not know what high school I had attended. They had not, as far as I could tell, made any effort to find out. I started at the Naval Academy in Annapolis the following July. The first 6 weeks at the academy are called plebe summer, and they are designed to break you down. I do not need to describe plebe summer in detail. I will only say that nothing the Naval Academy did to me during those 6 weeks was harder than what my mother had done to me at the kitchen sink in Erie when I was 14. I had been broken down already. I had been built back up by an aunt who loved me. The academy could do its worst, and its worst was easier than what I had already survived. I excelled at the academy. I do not say that with any pride. I say it with the kind of factual flatness that comes from describing your own survival. I made the dean's list every semester. I was selected as a squad leader by my second year. I was chosen for a competitive summer leadership program at the Pentagon between my third and fourth years. By the time I was a senior, I was on track to graduate in the top 15% of my class, which meant I would have my pick of warfare specialties when I was commissioned. I chose surface warfare. I wanted to be on a ship. I wanted to be in the open ocean, far from the small kitchen in Erie, doing something that mattered. The summer before my graduation, I had a difficult decision to make. The graduation ceremony at the Naval Academy is one of the largest and most prestigious commencement events in the United States. It is held in Annapolis at the football stadium. Tens of thousands of people attend. The President of the United States or the Vice President typically gives the commencement address. After the formal graduation, every newly commissioned officer participates in a smaller, more personal ceremony where a family member or significant person in their life pins their first set of officer rank insignia onto their uniform. This is called the commissioning ceremony, and it is the most emotionally significant moment of the entire weekend for most of the new officers. I had to decide who was going to pin my insignia. Aunt Cordelia was going to be there. There was no question about that. Aunt Cordelia was going to be sitting in the front row, in the seat I had reserved for her, in the new dress she had bought for the occasion. Aunt Cordelia had earned, 10,000 times over, the right to pin my insignia. But I had also done something I had not told anyone about. 3 months before graduation, in a moment of weakness or of grace or of both, I had sent a letter to my parents in Erie. I had not seen them in 8 years. I had not spoken to them on the phone in 8 years. I had no idea if they even still lived in the same house. I had written the letter on a Thursday night in my dorm room, sitting at my small Naval Academy desk in my uniform, and I had written it carefully and briefly. I had told them where I was. I had told them what I had become. I had told them that I was being commissioned as a naval officer in 3 months, and that the ceremony would be held in Annapolis, and that if they wanted to attend, they would be welcome to be present. I had not told them I forgave them. I had not told them I missed them. I had simply offered them the information, and I had let them decide what to do with it. I had not expected them to come. I had mailed the letter on a Friday afternoon. I had not received a response. The day of my graduation arrived. The morning was cool and bright. I was up at 4 a.m. with the rest of my graduating class. We put on our dress whites. We marched to the football stadium. The ceremony lasted almost 3 hours. The Vice President of the United States gave the commencement address. We threw our hats in the air. I held my diploma in my hands, my own actual hands, and I thought about the 14-year-old girl in pajamas standing in a kitchen in Erie, and I almost started crying right there on the field. But I did not, because Naval Academy graduates do not cry on the field on graduation day. The commissioning ceremonies took place on the lawn outside the chapel after the formal graduation. Each graduate had a designated spot on the lawn where their family could meet them. I walked to my spot. Aunt Cordelia was already there. She was wearing the new dress, a navy blue knee-length dress that suited her, and she was holding a small velvet box that contained the gold ensign bars she was going to pin onto my collar in the ceremony. She hugged me. She was crying. She was not trying to hide it. Imani, I am so proud of you. I cannot put it into words. Aunt Cordelia, I would not be standing here without you. Sweetheart, you would. You are too strong not to be standing here. I just had the privilege of getting a front row seat to it. We stood together for a moment. The plan was that the ceremonial pinning would happen in about 20 minutes, after a brief opening from the senior officer presiding over the commissioning. I was looking around at the other families, at the other new officers being hugged by their parents, when I saw something I had not expected to see. My father was walking toward me across the lawn. He was alone. He was wearing a brown suit that did not fit him well. He looked older than I remembered, much older, the way fathers look older when you have not seen them in 8 years. He was holding a small bouquet of grocery store flowers. He was walking slowly, as if he were not entirely sure I would let him approach. Behind him, I could see my mother standing about 30 feet back near a tree, holding her purse with both hands and not coming any closer. My father stopped about 6 feet from me. He looked at my dress whites. He looked at my hat. He looked at my face. His mouth was working in the way men's mouths work when they are trying very hard not to cry in public. Imani. Hello, Dad. Imani, I got your letter. I have been carrying it in my pocket for 3 months. I read it every day. Did you? Yes, your mother and I, we did not know how to come. We did not know if you wanted us here. We bought the bus tickets 2 weeks ago. We almost did not get on the bus. Your mother almost did not come. I told her I was going whether she came or not. We took the bus from Erie to Baltimore last night and a taxi here this morning. I am sorry, Imani. I do not know what to say. I am just sorry. I am so sorry. I looked at my father. I had not seen this man in 8 years. He was the man who had let my mother put me in the front seat of my aunt's Corolla when I was 14 years old and let her drive me away. He had been at work that morning. He had not come home in time to stop it. He had never, in 8 years, called me to apologize. But he had come to my graduation. He had come on a bus. He was holding grocery store flowers in his shaking hands, and he was crying in front of me on the lawn of the United States Naval Academy. Dad, I am glad you came. He nodded. He could not speak. Aunt Cordelia, who had been standing beside me through all of this, did something extraordinary in that moment. She took 1 step forward, looked at my father, and said, very quietly, Marcus, Imani is about to be commissioned as an officer. The ceremony starts in 15 minutes. I'm going to give you a gift right now because I think you have earned the right to be hurt by it, and I think Imani has earned the right to give it to you. She turned to me. She held out the small velvet box with the ensign bars. Imani, you came to me when you were 14 years old with 1 duffel bag and a library book, and I have loved you for 12 years like you were my own daughter. I would have been honored to pin these bars on your collar today. I am going to be honored a different way instead. I am going to ask you to let your father do it. Not because he has earned it, but because he has come this far, and because the version of him that is standing in front of you on this lawn is the version that has been working on becoming better since the day he got your letter. And I think your father needs to be the man who pins these bars on you today, even if he does not deserve it. I am going to be standing right next to you the whole time. You are not going to be alone. Will you let him do it? I looked at Aunt Cordelia. I looked at my father. My father was now openly weeping. He was holding the grocery store flowers in one hand, and the other hand had come up to cover his mouth, and he was making the small wet sounds that men make when they are crying and they are trying not to. Imani, I do not know if I should accept this. I do not deserve to accept this. Dad, Aunt Cordelia is right. Come here. He came to me. He put the flowers down on the grass. The presiding officer, a senior naval captain who had been preparing the small group of new officers and their families for the ceremony, came over to me with the standard pinning script. I told him quietly that there had been a small change, that my father would be doing the pinning. The captain nodded. He had clearly seen many things on this lawn in his career. 2 minutes later, the formal commissioning ceremony for our small group began. The captain spoke briefly about the meaning of the oath we had just taken, about the responsibility of becoming an officer in the United States Navy, about the families who had supported us. Then he called each of us forward by name to be pinned by the family member of our choosing. When my name was called, I stepped forward. My father stepped forward beside me. He took the velvet box from Aunt Cordelia with hands that were shaking so badly I thought he was going to drop it. He opened the box. He took out the small gold ensign bar. He looked up at my collar, and he tried to speak, and his voice cracked so badly that the cadet standing next to him, a young man named Patel from Texas who had been my classmate for 4 years, instinctively reached up and pooed a steadying hand on my father's shoulder. Patel did not know who my father was. Patel just knew that this man was about to break in front of his daughter, and that he should not break alone. My father tried to speak again. His voice cracked again. The third time, he managed to say the words that the script called for, the simple words that every father is supposed to say when pinning his daughter's first officer insignia. Ensign Imani Whitfield, by the authority vested in me as your father, I hereby pin upon you the bars of your office. May you wear them with honor. He pinned the bar on my collar. His hands were so unsteady that the captain quietly stepped in to help him fasten the back. My father's eyes were streaming. Aunt Cordelia was crying. Patel from Texas was crying. The captain was crying. I was crying. The whole small lawn was crying. When my father finished pinning the bar, he stepped back and he saluted me. The first salute. Every newly commissioned officer in the United States Navy receives a first salute from a person of their choosing, traditionally a family member or mentor, and the new officer gives that person a silver dollar in exchange. I had a silver dollar in my pocket. I returned my father's salute. Then I handed him the silver dollar. He took it in both hands like it was a religious object. He pressed it against his chest. He could not speak. Behind him, my mother was now walking slowly toward us across the lawn. She had been watching from the tree the entire time. She reached the edge of our small group, and she stopped, and she looked at me with the face of a woman who had spent 8 years not allowing herself to look at the size of what she had done. She did not say anything. She just stood there. I looked at my mother for a long moment. I do not want to romanticize what passed between us. I did not feel forgiveness in that moment. I felt something more complicated than forgiveness. I felt a kind of sorrowful clarity, the recognition that the woman in front of me was not going to be repaired by any single moment, including this one, and that whatever relationship I was going to have with her in the future was going to be slow and small and built carefully out of very little. Mom. Imani. Thank you for coming. She started crying. I let her cry. I did not hug her. I did not tell her it was all right because it was not all right, but I did not tell her to leave either. The rest of the day was a blur of photographs and embraces and small celebrations across the lawn of the Naval Academy. Aunt Cordelia and I had dinner that night with my parents at a small Italian restaurant in Annapolis. The dinner was awkward and quiet, but it was a dinner, and it was the first meal I had eaten with my parents in 8 years. My father did most of the talking, in small halting sentences, mostly directed to my aunt. My mother spoke very little. I understood, watching her across the table, that she was a woman who had not yet learned how to apologize, and that the work of becoming a person who could apologize was going to be the work of the rest of her life, and that I could not do that work for her. In the 4 years since my commissioning, the relationship between me and my parents has rebuilt itself in very small increments. My father calls me twice a month. He has never missed a call. He asks me about my work, about my ship, about my life, with the careful curiosity of a man who is trying to make up for years of absence one phone call at a time. My mother calls me less often. When she does call, our conversations are short and polite. She has apologized to me twice. The first apology was insufficient. The second one was better. I expect there will be more. My brother Devonte did not become a professional hockey player. He played through high school at a competitive level, but he was not, as it turned out, NHL material. He went to a small college in western Pennsylvania on a partial hockey scholarship and is now 22 years old, working as a youth hockey coach in Erie and figuring out what he wants to do with the rest of his life. He and I have started speaking again. He does not remember the day I was sent away. He was 10 years old. He told me, the first time we talked, that he had spent his entire teenage years believing I had moved to Cleveland because I had wanted to. He had not known that I had been sent away for him. The discovery of that fact has been very hard on him. We are working on it. Aunt Cordelia is now 52 years old and is still my favorite person in the world. She lives in the same Cleveland apartment. She came to visit me on my ship in Norfolk last year, and the chief petty officer who showed her around called her ma'am the entire time. I have introduced her to everyone I know in the Navy as my mother, because that is what she is, and the word feels right when I use it. Here is what I have learned. Some children are sent away from their own homes by parents who have decided to call them too expensive, and the children who survive that sentence carry it inside their bodies for the rest of their lives. You do not get to put it down. but you do get to choose what you build on top of it. You can build a life so completely your own that when the people who sent you away finally come to find you, they have to walk across a lawn at the United States Naval Academy in a brown suit that does not fit them, holding grocery store flowers, with their voices cracking, and you can decide in that moment whether to let them stand near you. The choice belongs to you, and only you, because they took every other choice away from you when they sent you out the door. If this story moved you tonight, please hit that like button, because every like helps this story reach another child who was told they were too expensive to keep around. Drop a comment and tell me, has someone in your family ever stepped in and saved you when your own parents would not? I read every single comment, and I promise yours will be seen. And if you want to hear more true stories like mine, please subscribe and turn on the bell, because I share a new story every week. Take care of yourselves out there. And remember, the children who are sent away usually come back as the people their families never imagined they could become. And by the time they come back, they do not need their families anymore. That is the thing the families never see coming.